Today in our World Cultures class, I'm going to ask you to ponder for a moment the effects of modernity on what had been a historically relatively stable worldview. In doing that, we're going to look at modernity and worldview, how modernity produced a universal, or at least a very widespread, nearly worldwide worldview, certainly in what would be the modern industrial world. This was one of the greatest, if not the great shift in worldview that the world has ever witnessed. Perhaps only first century Christianity could have been considered more significant. It's also the first truly global culture, because even in first century Christianity, that affected the Greco-Roman world. In this process, the church has been largely replaced by the university, and faith has been replaced by what they would call reason. The French Revolution was the culmination of this process, as it shattered the very foundations of history and imposed in a violent revolution a new world order. And with it came a new worldview as well. From that time forward, modernity spread around the Western world and then throughout the entire world through the industrialization process. Now, the cognitive themes of modernism are varied. In fact, this list could be so vast we could easily spend an entire semester in one of our philosophy classes or something of that nature speaking about what took place here. We simply cannot even come close to covering all of the possible cognitive themes of modernism in this class. So let me mention only a very few of the most significant ones, and then leave it to you guys to study the rest at a time and place of your interest in choosing. First of all, that Aristotelian or Greek dualism affected Western thought in a significant manner. Now what this was, it split what used to be a holistic view of the world in which the spiritual and the material were one, and the material world was often seen as flowing out of and being controlled by and guided by the spiritual realities, or in other words, God and His decisions as He worked in our lives and in creation. This dualistic view separated the natural from the supernatural. No longer were they connected. No longer did one flow out of the other. No longer did one depend on the other. And it also then brought about an equality between reality, what is real to us, and physical matter. In other words, reality could no longer be a spiritual matter. It could no longer even be an emotional matter. It had to be something that we could touch and taste and manipulate in the laboratory. And if we couldn't do that, then it could not be considered reality. Science became then, in this way, through coercion, through mockery, through imposition, the final arbiter of truth. In other words, science claimed the capacity to tell us what was right, what was true, what was real. We no longer had that capacity ourselves. It had been stripped from us. And in the process, much of our humanity had been stripped from us as well. This brought about a shift in interest from the eternity to the present, from the spiritual to the material. We can see how this has affected every aspect of American life. For example, listen to an awful lot of sermons, and they'll be self-help for today, and it'll be the prosperity gospel instead of heaven or hell. It took our focus from a God-centered humanity to a human-centered existence. It brought science into conflict with religion. No longer were the two seen as simply different ways to understand different aspects of truth and reality. Material secularism also then took on heavenly spirituality, and a means to success was a means to acquire more wealth and more prosperity and more comfort in this world, not working for a better place in this world and a better place in eternity. The public sphere was separated or divorced from the private sphere. If you wanted to believe something religious, that was okay, as long as you didn't try to share it with somebody else, as long as you kept it hidden away on Sundays when somebody else didn't have to see it, and you weren't permitted to bring that into the public sphere anymore. Just look at some coach who tries to have a prayer at football games on Friday night. See what happens to him, and you'll see the reality of how total and how absolute that prohibition has come. Now, what were the effects on Christianity, our religious faith as Christians? This foundationalism led to a reductionist view of humans. No longer were we God's great creation. We were simply this conglomeration of cells and of material, of matter, and of energy. We were an accident of evolution and nothing more. We had lost our sense of identity, our sense of meaning, and our sense of purpose. This impersonal order then suppressed the relational. What I felt about you and how I interacted with you was no longer important. What was important was that I accepted this foundational view of humanity where we simply were what we could become, that we were judged by what we could gain and not by how we could interact with others and make our world a better place. Causality became accidental rather than divine. In other words, I am what I am because of an accident of nature, not because God created me for some purpose or some mission or some reason to exist in this world. And law and morality became socially defined and implemented by the all-powerful government. Anything could be legal and moral depending on what the government chose it to be at that particular moment. And it was often the anarchy of the populist that imposed that upon the rest. And self replaced soul. In other words, we became concerned about who we were and what we could accomplish and what we could accumulate rather than on our eternal existence. This had many effects on the church as well. The church soon came to be seen as some sort of a social club. We went because what we could get out of it. Look at how many people look for their church today based on the programs the church has, what it offers for me, what it offers for my kids, something of that nature. The church is no longer seen as a family, something to which we belong. It's something that we use to get something that we want. Relationships become contractual. You give me what I want, I'll give you my presence and my loyalty. I don't get what I want from you, and you won't see me around here anymore. Missionary work became the civilizing of the world. In other words, it's doing good. It's feeding the hungry. It's clothing the naked. It's offering popular programs. It's giving out Western medication to people that don't have it. And in that, the nation state replaced God, both in the nation and in the concept of the church as well. And so we see churches now subservient to the nation state rather than being subservient to God and what God would say or dictate to them. Reason, or what is called reason by science, replaced faith, and we have to see something to believe it. See how many American Christians today have very little concept of a miraculous, such as we see presented in the Bible. And universalism replaced inspired revelation. In other words, your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth, and that's all that really matters. The effects on the individual were equally striking. Emotional control suppressed expression. In other words, I'm supposed to maintain emotional control at all time. That's part of being academic. That's part of being reasonable. And so I'm not supposed to get worked up about anything or excited about anything or concerned about anything, unless maybe it's who's going to win the football game this Friday night. Life, liberty, and equality became the inalienable rights. In other words, life, you have a right to live in comfort and well-being. Liberty, you have the right to secure for yourself all of the material possessions that you want. And certainly, nobody else can become wealthy if it means you might be rather poor. And so we have this leveling of the playing field, as our modern politicians like to say. Morals often become a personal matter. How you want to live, that's okay with you. And how I want to live, that's okay with me. And I don't have a right to tell you what to do, and you certainly don't have a right to tell me what I should do. And the concept of material prosperity in the here and now has replaced a sense of working for a better future and of someday acquiring a place in heaven. This meant that in most cases something called evolution or evolution would replace redemption. We aren't restored to something better through a conversion experience. We aren't redeemed from a deficient or a defective lifestyle that has been of our own choosing. by an outward intervention of God in our lives through Christ. We simply have to evolve or grow into something better, and that comes about as we learn more about this world that supposedly is accidentally evolving and developing around us. As you can see then, this modernity has to a great degree stripped the humanity out of humans, and it's turned us into machines, into cogs in a machine. We simply do our job and we accumulate wealth. We die, and that's the end of it all, as somebody fights to see who's going to get what we've left behind.